My hands were shaking as I stood frozen outside Nathan's apartment door, my heart pounding so loud I was sure the entire building could hear it. The words I had just heard through the thin walls made my blood turn to ice, and I pressed my back against the hallway wall trying to make sense of what Victoria had just said. The plan is working perfectly. She has no idea what's coming. Victoria's voice was cold, calculated, nothing like the warm tone she used around me. I held my breath, straining to hear more. After the ceremony, we'll have access to everything. The timing has to be perfect, Isabella. One mistake and we lose it all. Isabella? What was Nathan's family friend doing here so late? And what plan were they talking about? My mind raced as I tried to piece together the conversation I was overhearing. "Don't worry," came Isabella's reply, her voice barely above a whisper. She trusts Nathan completely. The poor girl is so in love she'd sign anything he put in front of her. They were talking about me. They had to be. But what did they mean about signing things? About access to everything? Let me back up and tell you how I ended up pressed against this door, eavesdropping on what sounded like a conspiracy involving my own fiancé. Earlier that evening, I had been buzzing with excitement. Tomorrow was our engagement party, and I wanted to surprise Nathan with his favorite homemade lasagna and garlic bread. We'd been together for 2 years, and he proposed 6 months ago with the most beautiful vintage ring I'd ever seen. I was head over heels in love with this man who made me laugh every day and supported my dreams of starting my own marketing firm. I had spent the entire afternoon cooking, humming wedding songs, and imagining our future together. Nathan and I had talked about having kids, buying a house with a big backyard, maybe getting a golden retriever. Everything felt perfect, like a fairy tale coming true. I decided to surprise him instead of calling first. Nathan had mentioned he might be working late on blueprints for his architecture firm, so I figured I'd bring dinner to him and we could eat together while he worked. It seemed romantic and thoughtful. The drive to his apartment building took 20 minutes, and I spent the whole time smiling, thinking about how lucky I was. Nathan was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was kind, funny, ambitious, and he treated me like I was the most important person in his world. His family had been a little cold at first, especially his mother, Victoria, but I figured that was normal. Some mothers are protective of their sons. I parked outside his building and grabbed the warm containers of food from my passenger seat. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt like it took forever because I was so excited to see the look on his face when I showed up with his favorite meal. But as I walked down the hallway toward apartment 4B, I heard voices coming from inside. That wasn't unusual. Nathan often had friends over or took work calls in the evening. But something about the tone made me pause. The voices sounded serious, almost secretive. I raised my hand to knock, but then I heard my name. Eliza has no idea about the financial situation. She thinks Nathan's firm is doing well. That was definitely Victoria's voice. But why was she talking about me? And what financial situation? I pressed my ear closer to the door, my heart starting to race. "The inheritance money will solve everything," Victoria continued. $24 million is more than enough to save the business and set us up for life. She's so naive, she'll never see it coming. My inheritance? How did Victoria even know about that? I had never discussed my parents' life insurance money with Nathan's family. In fact, I rarely talked about it with anyone. My parents died in a car accident when I was 19, and the settlement had been sitting in a trust fund ever since. I lived off my own salary and pretended that money didn't exist because it felt wrong to benefit from my parents' death. "And you're sure Nathan can go through with this?" Isabella asked. "He doesn't have a choice. The business is 3 months away from bankruptcy. He'll do whatever it takes." My legs felt weak. Whatever it takes? What did that mean? I heard footsteps moving toward the door and quickly stepped back, my mind spinning with questions and a growing sense of dread. What exactly were Victoria and Isabella planning? And how deep was Nathan involved in whatever this was? I ducked into the stairwell just as I heard the apartment door handle turn. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I crouched behind the concrete wall, clutching the containers of lasagna that now felt cold and heavy in my hands. The door opened and I heard Victoria's heels clicking on the hallway floor. "Remember, timing is everything," Victoria said in a low voice. "The wedding is in 6 weeks. We need those documents signed before then." "What if she gets suspicious?" Isabella's voice was worried. "She's not stupid, Victoria. What if she starts asking questions?" Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was the kind of laugh that made my skin crawl. "Isabella, dear, you worry too much. Eliza is completely blinded by love. She sees Nathan as her knight in shining armor who rescued her from her lonely little life. She won't question anything he asks her to sign, especially if we frame it as romantic wedding planning." I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from gasping. They were talking about me like I was some kind of target, some naive little girl they could manipulate. "Besides," Victoria continued, "even if she did get suspicious, what could she do? She has no family left to warn her, no one who would believe her over Nathan's word. We've made sure she's isolated." Isolated? What did that mean? I thought about my social circle. It was true that most of my close friends had drifted away over the past year, but that was natural when you're in a serious relationship, right? Nathan and I spent most of our time together, and he always had good reasons why we couldn't hang out with my old college friends. "The accident needs to look completely natural," Isabella whispered. "Just like before." Before? My blood turned to ice. What did she mean, just like before? "Don't worry about that part," Victoria said firmly. "I've handled this kind of situation before. The key is patience and making sure there are no loose ends. Nathan's job is to keep her happy and trusting until we're ready. Your job is to help me with the paperwork and logistics." I heard their footsteps moving toward the elevator, and I stayed frozen in the stairwell until I heard the elevator doors close. Only then did I dare to breathe normally again. My mind was spinning as I tried to process what I had just heard. They were planning something involving my inheritance money, something that required me to sign documents, and they had mentioned an accident. The way Victoria said, "just like before," made it sound like they had done this to someone else. I thought about my relationship with Nathan, trying to remember if there had been any warning signs I had missed. We met 2 years ago at a coffee shop near my office. I had been working late on a marketing campaign and stopped in for a caffeine fix. Nathan was sitting alone at a corner table, sketching building designs, and when I accidentally bumped into his table, we started talking. He was charming and funny, asking about my work and seeming genuinely interested in my ideas. He told me he was an architect working on residential projects, and we talked for hours about design and creativity. When he asked for my number, I felt like I had won the lottery. Our first few dates were perfect. Nathan took me to art galleries and nice restaurants, always insisting on paying even though I offered to split the bill. He said he was old-fashioned and liked taking care of the woman he was dating. I thought it was sweet. Looking back now, I realized Nathan had asked a lot of questions about my background during those early dates. He wanted to know about my family, my childhood, my parents. When I told him about the car accident and how I was completely alone in the world, he had been so sympathetic and caring. He said he wanted to be my family now. I had thought it was romantic. Now I wondered if he was gathering information. As the elevator descended, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If they were planning to access my inheritance after we got married, what exactly did Victoria mean when she talked about an accident? I drove home in a daze, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. The containers of lasagna sat forgotten on my passenger seat, probably cold by now, just like the sick feelings spreading through my chest. Every red light felt like torture as my mind raced with questions I was terrified to answer. When I finally made it to my small apartment, I threw the food in the refrigerator and collapsed on my couch. Sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard Victoria's cold voice talking about accidents and timing and how I would never see it coming. By 3 a.m, I gave up trying to rest and opened my laptop. If Nathan and his family were planning something involving my inheritance, I needed to understand exactly what they might be after. I logged into my bank account and stared at the numbers I usually tried to ignore. The life insurance settlement from my parents' death, plus years of compound interest, had grown to just over $24 million, the exact amount Victoria had mentioned. My stomach dropped. How could she possibly know that specific number? I had never told Nathan the exact amount. I had mentioned that my parents left me some money, but I always downplayed it, saying it was enough to be comfortable or a nice safety net. I never wanted people to treat me differently because of money I never asked for. I started thinking about all the times Nathan had brought up financial planning. About 6 months ago, right around the time he proposed, he had suggested we meet with a financial advisor to plan our future together. He said it would be smart to combine our resources and make sure we were making the best decisions as a couple. I had put him off, saying I preferred to keep things simple until after the wedding. Now I realized he might have been trying to get access to my accounts much earlier than I thought. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found my lawyer's number. Mr. Peterson had handled my parents' estate and still managed the trust fund. I knew it was too early to call, but I sent him an email asking if anyone had been making inquiries about my inheritance. I tried to make it sound casual, like I was just checking for wedding planning purposes. While I waited for a response, I started researching Nathan's architecture firm online. What I found made my blood run cold. The company website looked professional enough, but when I dug deeper into business records and news articles, a very different picture emerged. Morrison Associates Architecture had been struggling financially for over 2 years. There were several articles about delayed projects, unhappy clients, and rumors of bankruptcy. How had I never known this? Nathan always talked about work like everything was going well. He mentioned new projects and important clients, but looking at the evidence, his firm was barely hanging on. I thought about all the expensive gifts Nathan had given me over the past year. The designer handbag for my birthday, the weekend trip to Napa Valley, the engagement ring that probably cost more than most people's cars. If his business was failing, where was this money coming from? My phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Good morning, beautiful. Can't wait to see you today. Mom wants to meet with us this afternoon to go over some wedding details. Love you." I stared at the message, trying to see past the sweet words to whatever might be hidden underneath. Was this the meeting where they would try to get me to sign something? I texted back. "Sounds good. What kind of details?" His response came quickly. "Just boring paperwork stuff. Insurance beneficiaries, name changes, that kind of thing. Mom says it's better to handle it all before the wedding so we can focus on enjoying our honeymoon." Insurance beneficiaries. My hands started shaking again. Around 8 in the morning, Mr. Peterson called me back. His voice was concerned when he told me that yes, someone had been making inquiries about my trust fund. About 3 months ago, a woman claiming to be a wedding planner had called asking about standard procedures for accessing funds for wedding expenses. She had known enough personal details about me to seem legitimate. "I didn't give her any specific information, of course," Mr. Peterson said. "But I'm concerned that someone was fishing for details about your inheritance. Have you hired a wedding planner, Eliza?" "No," I whispered. "I haven't hired anyone. I think you should come in and see me as soon as possible. There are some things we need to discuss about protecting your assets." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and trying to make sense of everything. Nathan's family was in financial trouble. Someone had been investigating my inheritance. Victoria and Isabella were planning something that involved me signing documents and mentioned an accident. The pieces were starting to form a picture I didn't want to see. My phone rang, and Nathan's name appeared on the screen. For the first time in 2 years, I hesitated before answering. "Hey," I said, trying to sound normal. "Hi, sweetheart. I was thinking we could grab lunch before meeting with Mom. There's actually something important I need to talk to you about." Something important. My heart started racing again. "What about?" I asked. "It's better if we discuss it in person, but don't worry, it's good news. I think you're going to be really excited." As I agreed to meet him, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever Nathan wanted to tell me was going to change everything. The engagement party was everything Victoria had promised it would be: elegant, sophisticated, and completely overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over the mansion's main ballroom, where about 60 guests mingled with champagne glasses and congratulated Nathan and me on our upcoming wedding. I stood next to Nathan in a navy blue dress I had bought specifically for tonight, smiling until my cheeks hurt and accepting hugs from people I barely knew. Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was, how perfect Nathan and I looked together, how excited they were for our wedding in 6 weeks. If only they knew what I had discovered. "You look absolutely radiant, dear," said Mrs. Henderson, one of Victoria's country club friends. "Nathan is such a catch. You must be over the moon." "I am," I replied automatically, the lie tasting bitter in my mouth. "We're very happy." Nathan squeezed my hand and smiled down at me with what looked like genuine love. That was the part that confused me most. When I looked at him, I still saw the man who brought me coffee in bed every Sunday morning and who knew exactly how to make me laugh when I had a bad day at work. How could someone fake that level of affection for 2 whole years? During lunch earlier, Nathan had told me his important news. He wanted us to start joint bank accounts after the wedding and had already spoken to a financial advisor about the best way to combine our assets. He made it sound romantic, like we were taking the next step in building our life together. "I want us to be a real team," he had said, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "No more yours and mine, just ours." I had nodded and smiled, but inside I felt sick. This was exactly what Victoria and Isabella had been talking about, getting access to my money. Now, watching Nathan work the room at our engagement party, I tried to see him through new eyes. He was charming and confident, making jokes with the men and complimenting the women. Everyone seemed to genuinely like him. But I kept thinking about what Victoria had said. He'll do whatever it takes. "Eliza, sweetheart, you look beautiful tonight." I turned to find Victoria approaching with a champagne flute in each hand. She was wearing an expensive black dress and her signature pearl necklace, looking every inch the wealthy socialite. "Thank you, Victoria. This party is incredible. You really didn't have to do all this." "Nonsense," she said, handing me one of the glasses. "You're going to be my daughter-in-law. Only the best for family." The word family made my stomach turn. I took a small sip of champagne and tried to keep my expression neutral. "I'm so glad Nathan found you," Victoria continued, her voice warm and motherly. "He's been through some difficult relationships in the past. It's wonderful to see him with someone who truly understands him." Difficult relationships? Nathan had mentioned a few ex-girlfriends, but never said anything about difficulties. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casually curious. Victoria's eyes flickered for just a moment before her smile returned. "Oh, just young love drama. Nothing serious. But with you, I can tell it's different. You two are perfect for each other." Before I could ask more questions, the sound of a spoon tapping against glass filled the room. Thomas, Nathan's father, was standing near the fireplace calling for everyone's attention. "If I could have everyone gather around," Thomas announced. "Victoria and I would like to say a few words about our son and his beautiful fiancé." The crowd moved closer, and Nathan wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me against his side. I could smell his cologne, the same scent that used to make me feel safe and loved. Now it just reminded me of how thoroughly I had been deceived. Victoria stepped forward, raising her champagne glass. "When Nathan first told us about Eliza, we knew she was special. She's intelligent, kind, and she makes our son happier than we've ever seen him." The guests murmured their agreement, and I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Victoria's words sounded so sincere, so full of maternal affection. If I hadn't heard her true feelings through that apartment door, I would have been touched by her speech. "Eliza, dear, we want you to know that you're not just gaining a husband, you're gaining a whole family who will love and protect you always." love and protect me. The irony was almost too much to bear. To Nathan and Eliza, Victoria concluded, raising her glass higher, may your marriage be filled with joy, prosperity, and many, many years together. The crowd echoed the toast, and I lifted my glass with everyone else, the champagne bubbles feeling like they were mocking me. As people began to disperse back into smaller conversations, I noticed Isabella standing near the back of the room. She had been quiet all evening, but now she was watching me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. Our eyes met across the room, and for a split second I saw something that looked almost like guilt flash across her face. Then Nathan leaned down and whispered in my ear, I love you so much, Eliza. I can't wait to spend the rest of my life with you. The rest of my life. Suddenly, Victoria's words about timing and accidents took on a whole new, terrifying meaning. The morning after the engagement party, I was nursing my third cup of coffee and trying to make sense of everything when my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer it. Eliza, this is Oliver, Nathan's brother. We need to talk. My heart started racing. Oliver had barely spoken to me at the party, just nodded politely when we were introduced. He was younger than Nathan, quieter, and seemed to stay in the background during family gatherings. What about? I asked carefully. Not over the phone. Can you meet me at Riverside Park in an hour? The bench by the duck pond. Come alone, and don't tell Nathan or anyone else in my family. The line went dead before I could respond. An hour later, I found Oliver sitting on the specified bench, looking nervous and constantly checking over his shoulder. He was wearing jeans and a baseball cap pulled low over his eyes, like he was trying to hide. Thank you for coming, he said as I sat down beside him. I wasn't sure you would. What's this about, Oliver? He was quiet for a long moment, watching the ducks swim across the pond. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. My family is going to kill you. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Not Nathan? At least I don't think so. But my mother and Isabella, they've done this before. They find women with money, get them involved with someone in our family, and then... He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Then what? I demanded, even though part of me already knew. Oliver reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. 2 years ago, there was a woman named Caroline Mitchell. She was engaged to my cousin James. Caroline had inherited a fortune from her grandmother, about $15 million. He opened the folder and showed me newspaper clippings. The headlines made my blood run cold. Young woman dies in hiking accident and tragic fall claims life of bride-to-be. Caroline died 3 weeks before her wedding, Oliver continued. She was hiking alone at Bear Mountain, supposedly. They said she slipped and fell from a cliff, but Caroline was an experienced hiker. She knew those trails better than anyone. I stared at the newspaper photo of Caroline. She was beautiful, with dark hair and a bright smile. She looked happy, in love, completely unaware of what was coming. The police ruled it an accident, Oliver said. But I knew something was wrong. Caroline had been asking questions about our family's finances right before she died. James let it slip that she was getting suspicious about some documents they wanted her to sign. Documents, I repeated, thinking about the meeting Victoria had planned for this afternoon. After Caroline died, James inherited everything as her fiancé. The money went straight to paying off family debts and saving the business. James got a nice cut for his trouble, and then he conveniently moved to Europe to grieve. Oliver pulled out more papers, bank records, business documents, police reports. I've been collecting evidence for 2 years, but I could never prove anything. Until now. What do you mean? Isabella isn't just a family friend, Eliza. She's my mother's partner in this. They've been working together for years, targeting wealthy women who are isolated and vulnerable. Isabella does the research, finds the targets, and my mother orchestrates everything else. I thought about how Isabella had been at every family gathering, always watching, always listening, how she seemed to know personal details about me that I had never shared with her directly. Isabella has a background in insurance fraud, Oliver continued. She knows how to make accidents look convincing, and my mother has connections everywhere. Police, coroners, judges. They've built a network that protects them. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Why risk it? Oliver's face was pained. Because Caroline was my friend. We grew up together and I watched her fall in love with James. I saw how happy she was, how excited she was about the wedding, and I did nothing to stop it. He handed me the folder. I can't live with that guilt anymore, and I won't let them do it to you. I flipped through the documents, my hands shaking. There were photos of Caroline and James together, looking just as happy as Nathan and I did in our pictures. There were copies of financial documents Caroline had signed, giving James access to her accounts. There were even hotel receipts showing Isabella had been in the area when Caroline died. Nathan, I whispered. How much does he know? Oliver's expression darkened. I think he knows about the money part. He's definitely involved in getting you to trust him and sign things. But the murder part? I'm honestly not sure. Nathan's not a killer, but he's weak. He does whatever Mom tells him to do. What am I supposed to do with this? Don't go to that meeting this afternoon, Oliver said urgently. Whatever they want you to sign, don't do it. And start making plans to disappear. Because once they realize you're onto them, you're in immediate danger. As I walked back to my car with the folder clutched against my chest, one thought kept echoing in my mind. If they had killed Caroline 3 weeks before her wedding, how much time did I have left? I spent the rest of the morning in my apartment, spreading Oliver's evidence across my kitchen table like pieces of a horrifying puzzle. The more I studied the documents, the clearer the pattern became. Caroline wasn't their first victim. There were references to at least 2 other women who had died in accidents after getting involved with Victoria's extended family network. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Nathan, asking if I was ready for our meeting with his mother. Each message made my skin crawl, but I forced myself to respond normally. I couldn't let them know I was suspicious. At noon, I drove to the address Victoria had given me, a sleek office building downtown. The directory listed Hartwell Financial Services on the 15th floor. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding with each floor that passed. The office was impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows and expensive furniture. A receptionist directed me to a conference room where Victoria was waiting with a woman I didn't recognize. Eliza, dear, so glad you could make it, Victoria said, standing to give me a hug that felt like ice against my skin. This is Ms. Hartwell, our family's financial advisor. The woman was tall and blonde, probably in her 40s, wearing a perfectly tailored business suit. She smiled warmly and extended her hand. It's wonderful to meet you, Eliza. Victoria has told me so much about you. Something about her voice nagged at me, but I couldn't place it. We sat down at the polished conference table, and Ms. Hartwell opened a leather portfolio. Now, what we're going to do today is set up some basic financial structures for your marriage, she began. These documents will ensure that you and Nathan can access each other's assets seamlessly, which is especially important for tax purposes and estate planning. She slid several papers across the table toward me. The legal language was dense and confusing, but I caught key phrases. Irrevocable trust, full access, immediate transfer upon marriage. This seems quite complicated, I said, trying to buy time. Maybe I should have my own lawyer review these first. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Oh, that's not necessary, dear. Ms. Hartwell is one of the best in the business. These are standard documents that every married couple should have. Besides, Ms. Hartwell added, time is a factor here. With the wedding so close, we need to get these filed before the ceremony to ensure everything is properly processed. I pretended to read through the documents while secretly activating the voice recording app on my phone. If I was walking into a trap, I wanted evidence. I notice this gives Nathan immediate access to my trust fund, I said carefully. Is that normal? Absolutely, Ms. Hartwell replied smoothly. Modern marriages are partnerships. You'll have access to his assets as well, of course. But I had seen Nathan's financial records. He didn't have any significant assets to access. What if something happened to me? I asked, trying to sound casual. What would happen to the money then? Victoria and Ms. Hartwell exchanged a quick glance that they thought I didn't notice. Well, as your husband, Nathan would inherit everything, Ms. Hartwell said. That's standard inheritance law. But let's not think about such morbid things. You're young and healthy. Young and healthy, just like Caroline had been. I'm sorry, I said, standing up suddenly. I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed. Could I take these home and review them tonight? We could meet again tomorrow. Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw a flash of anger in her eyes. Eliza, we really need to handle this today. The timing is crucial for the tax implications. I understand, but this is a big decision. I just need one night to think it over. Ms. Hartwell leaned forward. Of course, dear, but I should mention that I'm leaving for Europe tomorrow for 3 weeks. If we don't handle this today, you'll have to wait until after your honeymoon to set up these protections. The pressure was obvious now. They needed me to sign today, and they were running out of ways to convince me. I'll take my chances, I said, gathering the papers. Thank you both for your time. As I walked toward the door, Ms. Hartwell called out, Eliza, wait. I turned back, and that's when I realized why her voice had seemed familiar. I had heard it before, whispering through Nathan's apartment door. Ms. Hartwell was Isabella. She had been wearing a wig and makeup to disguise herself, but now that I knew, the resemblance was unmistakable. Isabella had been posing as a financial advisor to trick me into signing away my inheritance. Is everything all right? Isabella asked, her voice slightly different now, more nervous. Everything's fine, I lied, clutching the papers against my chest. I'll call you tomorrow. I walked out of that office knowing that I had just blown their timeline. They would realize I was suspicious now, which meant I was in immediate danger. As I waited for the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. How did the meeting go? Mom says you seemed upset. They were already communicating about my reaction. I had maybe hours before they decided I was too much of a risk to keep alive. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, knowing that everything was about to change. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to the police station with Oliver's evidence folder and my phone recording from the meeting. My hands were shaking as I approached the front desk. I need to report a murder conspiracy, I said to the officer on duty. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Detective Sarah Chen, who had been listening to my story with growing interest. When I finished explaining everything, she leaned back in her chair. Ms. Eliza, I have to tell you something. We've been investigating Victoria Morrison and Isabella Kane for 8 months. My heart stopped. You have? Caroline Mitchell's family never believed the hiking accident story. They hired a private investigator who uncovered some inconsistencies. The PI brought his findings to us, and we've been building a case ever since. Detective Chen opened a thick file on her desk. Your evidence and recording are exactly what we needed to move forward. We've been waiting for them to target someone new so we could catch them in the act. So you knew they were going to try to kill me? We suspected, but we couldn't prove it without evidence of them actively planning another crime. Your recording of Isabella posing as a financial advisor is the smoking gun we needed. The detective explained that they had been monitoring Victoria and Isabella for months, but the women were careful. They used coded language, met in private locations, and had covered their tracks well with Caroline's murder. We'd like you to help us with a sting operation, Detective Chen said. We need to get them to reveal their full plan on record. 3 hours later, I was wearing a wire and driving to the remote family cabin, where Victoria had insisted Nathan and I spend our pre-wedding celebration. The police were positioned throughout the woods around the property, hidden but close enough to intervene if things went wrong. Nathan was already at the cabin when I arrived, and for a moment, Seeing him standing on the porch in his favorite sweater, I almost forgot he was part of this conspiracy. He looked so normal, so much like the man I had fallen in love with. "Hey, beautiful," he said, coming down to help me with my bag. "I'm so glad we're doing this. Just the two of us before all the wedding craziness." "Me too," I lied, letting him kiss my cheek. Inside the cabin, Victoria and Isabella were waiting. They had prepared dinner and opened a bottle of wine, playing the part of a loving family celebration. But I could see the tension in their eyes. "Eliza, darling, you seemed so stressed after our meeting today," Victoria said, pouring me a glass of wine. "I hope you're not having second thoughts about the financial arrangements." "Actually, I am," I said, deciding to push them into revealing their plan. "I spoke to my lawyer this afternoon. He said those documents would give Nathan complete control over my inheritance immediately after we're married." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Well, yes," Nathan said carefully. "That's what married couples do. They share everything." "But what if something happened to me right after the wedding?" I pressed. "Nathan would inherit $24 million. Isabella set down her wine glass with a sharp clink. "Why would you think about something like that?" "Because I know what happened to Caroline Mitchell." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's face went completely blank while Isabella looked like she might be sick. Nathan just stared at me in confusion. "Who's Caroline Mitchell?" Nathan asked. "Your cousin James's fiancé," I said, watching his face carefully. "The one who died in a hiking accident 3 weeks before their wedding." Nathan's confusion looked genuine, and I realized Oliver had been right. Nathan knew about the money scheme, but not the murder part. "That was a tragic accident," Victoria said coldly, her mask finally slipping completely. "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm implying that you killed her for her inheritance, just like you're planning to kill me." Isabella stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We should go." "Sit down, Isabella," I said firmly. "Or should I call you Ms. Hartwell?" Nathan looked back and forth between us, finally understanding that something was very wrong. "What's going on?" he demanded. "Mom, what is she talking about?" Victoria's composure cracked completely. "She's talking about survival, Nathan. Our family was 3 months from bankruptcy. Caroline's money saved us, and Eliza's money will secure our future permanently." "You killed Caroline?" Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "I did what was necessary," Victoria snapped. "Just like I'm going to do what's necessary now." She reached into her purse, but before she could pull out whatever was inside, the cabin door burst open and Detective Chen rushed in with 3 other officers. "Police! Nobody move!" The next few minutes were chaos. Isabella tried to run but was tackled by an officer before she reached the back door. Victoria stood frozen, her hand still in her purse, staring at me with pure hatred. "You little fool," she hissed. "You have no idea what you've done." Nathan collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. "I didn't know," he kept repeating. "I swear I didn't know about the murders." As the police led Victoria and Isabella away in handcuffs, Detective Chen turned to Nathan. "Mr. Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud." Nathan looked at me one last time as they put the handcuffs on him. "Eliza, I really did love you. That part was real. I watched the man I had planned to marry being led away, and I felt nothing but emptiness. 6 months later, I was living in a new city, 3 states away from the nightmare that had almost cost me my life. Victoria and Isabella were both sentenced to life in prison for Caroline's murder and the attempted murder conspiracy against me. Nathan received 5 years for fraud. The prosecutor believed his testimony that he hadn't known about the murder plans. Oliver visited me once, bringing closure and an apology on behalf of his family. He had cut all ties with them and was starting fresh, just like I was. I was in therapy, learning to trust my instincts again and recognizing the red flags I had missed. The experience had been traumatic, but it had also made me stronger and more aware. I started a foundation to help other women avoid financial predators, using my inheritance for something positive instead of letting it sit untouched. Caroline's family became close friends, and together we worked to make sure no other woman would fall victim to people like Victoria and Isabella. Sometimes I still woke up from nightmares about what could have happened if Oliver hadn't warned me, or if the police hadn't been investigating already. But mostly, I felt grateful to be alive and determined to use my second chance wisely. I learned that love without trust is just manipulation, and that the most dangerous predators are often the ones who seem the most charming. Most importantly, I learned to listen to that voice in my head that whispers when something isn't right. That voice had saved my life,